So carbonara, I had a friend once tell me that making carbonara was the messiest her kitchen ever got. She said it looked like a bomb went off. There's not that many ingredients, and yet her kitchen was a mess for making carbonara. There's this theory out there that you have to move fast for carbonara to work. And when we were in Rome last year, I realized that's not really the case, and there are a lot of shortcuts, and there are also a lot of ways to fix problems that you might have while you're making carbonara. So it's actually a very basic recipe. I think another myth about carbonara is that it has a cream base, and that's just not true. It's actually an egg base. Cream base would be an Alfredo sauce, and Alfredo is actually a very Italian-American thing, not an Italian thing. So our basics are going to be some sort of pork. I'm going to use bacon tonight, and yes, if you've been to Italy, you know that they usually use pancetta. I find bacon just easier to find here. Some of the pancetta that I get at my store is already cooked and cured, and I like to use the grease from the bacon to coat the pasta, and I'll show you that in a minute. Pecorino Romano cheese is the other big one here. Okay. And, of course, the pasta water. And this is the big one that I always forget, and the issue that most people have. So, and of course the pasta, which I've already cooked, so you guys don't have to literally sit here and listen to me talk while I boil water, because that would be boring. So for eggs, the egg is the base of this dish. If you don't eat eggs, there's no substitution for eggs. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen for you. Many recipes call for many different types of eggs. Some people is egg yolk only, some people is egg and white, and some people is a mix of both. I use a mix of both. So for 1 pound of pasta, I'm going to use 2 whole eggs and 4 egg yolks, and I just blend them up here. Now for those of you going, ew, raw egg. Yeah, you eat a lot of raw egg though. I don't think you realize how much raw egg you eat. It's in a lot of salad dressings. It's in it's in a lot of sauces, like a hollandaise sauce. If you eat eggs Benedict, it's in Benedict sauce. It's in a lot of stuff. You can look for pasteurized eggs at your grocery store, and that's going to cut down on any sort of weird germs. This is also partially cooked. I think that that's the other misconception. When we put it in the pan, it's going to cook on the hot pasta, and that is going to cook the egg enough for it to be creamy and velvety, but not so much that you've got scrambled eggs on pasta, because that's no good either. The second, of course, is the pork. I'm using bacon tonight. I've already cooked some of it, and I actually have the rendered bacon fat in a pan, which is the other key element to a carbonara. Carbonara is pasta, and what we're going to do before we add the egg, so that it doesn't just turn into scrambled egg, is to coat it in that bacon fat and that bacon grease. That's going to prevent it from getting too hot and turning into scrambled egg. It'll thin it out a little bit. The next is the cheese. So I'm going to use pecorino romano, which is the most traditional. Some people use a mix of this and Parmesan. It's up to you. You want to do it on the finest box grate, and some grocery stores sell it finely grated like this in their cheese section. You don't want it the long strands. You want it granular and small. And the last thing is the boiling water. So this is just water that I ladled out of the boiling pasta. I have missed this step so many times. I've been pouring out the pasta, draining it, and my husband has heard some sort of bad word come from my mouth because I forgot to put away the water. It's not the end of the world. You can easily use some warm hot water with a little bit of cornstarch. Really all you need is water and something starchy to thin it out. And in a pinch you can probably use just water. The starch isn't going to make it or break it, although it does help the sauce come together. Another fear people have, and which was my fear before I went to Rome, was that my sauce was going to be lumpy. It needed to be this perfect, velvety, rich, luscious sauce. And while we all want that, most of the sauces in Rome weren't that way. They were actually kind of granular and gritty, and I realized that I really liked that kind of texture in it. And it was a combination of both the egg yolk and the cheese, because they use a lot of cheese. They use way more cheese than Americans usually do. And in fact, you don't see this on American menus much at all. Carbonara isn't a sauce you can make ahead of time, like a marinara, and then just add a little cream for a rose sauce, or add a little bit of seafood and crushed red for a fra diavolo. It really has to be made with the pasta in real time, and therefore it's not on a lot of menus. And even in Italy, you'll see it served in Rome, but outside of Rome, you really won't see it that much unless you're at a restaurant that caters to American tourists. So when we came home from Italy last year, all I wanted was carbonara all the time. It was what I craved the most, it was what I wanted the most while I was there, and after we left Rome to tour some other areas, all I wanted was a good plate of carbonara, so I started making it myself at home. The last piece of this is, of course, the pasta, which I'll grab in a minute. It's in a colander. It's in the sink. So there's a common misconception, too, that you need to boil the pasta and then fast, lickety-split, move it from the colander to the pan with the sauce and make it really fast. You don't have to do that. You don't have to put that kind of pressure on yourself. I'm going to show you a couple of shortcuts so that you don't feel that same pressure to get it all done super, super, super fast, but you still end up with a good carbonara and a cooked sauce. The type of pasta you use does matter. In the US, we're going to see spaghetti carbonara is served the most, but in Rome, you're going to see bucatini, which is a thicker spaghetti that has a hollow center, used the most. You can find bucatini in most regular grocery stores. I have it in mine. You should be able to find it in yours. The hollow center, because it's thicker, actually makes it cook faster. So for an al dente, it's only 7 to 8 minutes. You want to make sure for carbonara that you do cook your pasta al dente, especially if you're like me and you cooked your pasta a little bit ahead of time, because it's going to cook a little bit more while you're tossing it with the sauce and while it's going into the rendered bacon fat. So don't overdo it. Another thing is people over salt. I actually don't add salt to my carbonara sauce, and that's weird for me because if you know me, you know I love salt. 2 reasons why. A, when you're boiling pasta, the pasta water should be as salty as the sea, as the Italians would say, and therefore your pasta is going to be a little salty. But pecorino romano cheese, a good aged cheese like this, is also going to be very salty, and different cheeses are going to range with different salt factors, and your salty water is going to range with different salt factors. So I don't add any salt, and I also don't add any black pepper until I've tasted the sauce, and I let my guests or my husband or I decide how much salt and pepper they want after it's all done. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a little bit of this water. And now I cooked my pasta probably about 20 or 30 minutes ago. You don't want to cook it so far in advance that you have to put it in the refrigerator and that it's cold, but you can do it 20 to 30 minutes in advance. It doesn't have to be a snap, 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 snap thing. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a little bit of this pasta water to my eggs. This is going to make sure that the moment that the egg hits the pan, that it doesn't just immediately turn to scramble. So I added here probably just about 1/4 cup of water. I'm going to set that aside because when I'm tossing the pasta with the egg, I also don't want it to be too thick. And you'll see it'll get kind of gloppy and clumpy, and you don't want it to do that either. I'll add some of this pasta water to thin it out as I go. I'm also going to add cheese, and what I learned in Rome was that I don't add nearly enough cheese. We are going to add a lot of cheese. So I'm going to add almost 1 cup of cheese to this, and then I'm going to add even more cheese to the top after it's done. If you are on keto or Atkins or paleo or just any kind of healthy diet, carbonara is not the dish for you. It is a delicious, luxurious dish, but it is basically fat on carb on fatty protein. It's excellent, but it is not in any way healthy at all. And when you go to Italy, it's served as a creamy dish. It's not served on a giant plate like we see here in America where you get the whole pound of pasta. It's served in a fairly small dish, almost as like an appetizer or a salad course before you get your meat. And in fact, in Italy, you would never see it served with scallops, ever, because seafood is a gentle dish and it's never served with anything that has dairy or cheese like carbonara. The bacon is considered to be the protein, and in fact, since this is just kind of a mid-course, you would be having your protein after the pasta. So you'd still be having chicken or beef or something else after the pasta. So you don't see it a lot. This isn't actually common over there. For anybody going, that's not authentic, she's using scallops. So over here I have my rendered bacon fat. Different types of bacon are going to have different types of fat that they have. So I've got probably about 2 tablespoons in here. I still have all those luscious little brown bits. I do take the bacon out with a slotted spoon just because of the fact that it's easier for me to mix the sauce and gauge where the sauce is and if it needs more water or cheese or whatnot without the bacon in it. So I'm going to add that back in afterwards. I'm going to let that heat for just a second before I add the pasta and check to see who else we have. Hi Valerie from Erie. Thank you for joining us. Doris, North Dakota. Must be cold there. We actually had a heat wave here today. It was pretty warm. I took my daughter to the park. Hi Jen. Jen is one of my friends that loves making carbonara. And Julia from Hawaii. I bet you we are all jealous of your weather in Hawaii. And hi Kathy. Nice to see you. I don't know where you are right now because you travel a lot all around. Okie dokie. Okay, so this has gotten pretty hot. Actually, I'm going to turn it down a little bit because I don't want it to burn when I put the pasta in. Okay, so like I said before, if you missed it, I cooked the pasta about 15 or 20 minutes ago before we went live. So a little bit longer than that now, probably about 40 minutes ago. So it's not room temperature, it's not ice cold. You don't want it to get that cold before you add it. I'm going to add it back into the bacon grease, and that's what's going to heat it up enough for me to do the sauce. So hold on one second while I grab that colander. This is a whole pound of pasta, and this is bucatini. Hold on a second here. Grab another. As you see here, bucatini is kind of, it's ropey. If I'm pressing on it, you can tell that it's hollow, and it's a little bit thicker than a regular spaghetti. If you don't want to make yours with bacon, that is perfectly fine. You can use butter or olive oil as your fat to make this. So what I'm going to do here is basically I'm reheating my pasta. I am tossing it in a hot pan with this bacon grease, and I will know when it's ready, when it's kind of glistening and ready to go. And I probably should have used actually might take some of this pasta out. I should have used a larger pan here, but my little cooktop doesn't allow for that. That's a little bit more manageable for what we're doing. We don't need to be throwing pasta around the kitchen. Okay, so we've got it here. We're heating it up. We're tossing it in that bacon grease. It's getting all those little brown bits up. It's getting warm again. And I want to make sure it is warm. I'm even going to touch it to see how hot it is. If the pasta is not hot enough, then that carbonara sauce isn't going to come together in the way you want it to. It needs to be hot enough for that cheese to melt. And I'm going to take it off the heating element when I add the egg sauce, because I also don't want too much heat that, again, it just turns to scrambled eggs. Although a very popular dish is scrambled eggs over spaghetti in some families. Not mine. That does not sound desirable to me, but in some. Okay. So you want to keep moving it when you're doing this, because you don't want, even though there's bacon grease on the bottom and technically it shouldn't stick, you don't want it to stick to the bottom. Let me grab one of my plates here. Okay, so I'm going to remove it from the heating element. You can hear it crackling and popping. And this is something you want to do a little bit faster here because you don't want it to lose too much of its heat. I am going to pour in, and now because I've removed half of my pasta, I'm only going to add half of my egg here. I am going to toss it while I add the egg sauce. I'm going to set that aside. Okay, keep tossing. That's the key here. Keep tossing. Keep it moving, and the heat from the pan, the heat from the pasta, the gluten from the pasta, the starch, all of that stuff is going to set it up to make a sauce. Like I said in the beginning, don't worry if it's a little bit granular. It's okay. They actually have it that way in Italy a lot. And now I've got a little bit too much sauce in here. I need a little bit more pasta. Hold on one second. Pasta on the top's a little bit hotter. In the case that you had pasta and it started to look a little bit dry, that is when you're going to add a little bit more of that starchy water. Every time it's different. It's really difficult for me to tell you how much starchy water you're going to need for your batch. I might not use any right now with this batch. I might just go with what I had added in, which was about 1/4 of a cup. Because right now I'm already looking a little, I don't want to say sloppy, but the sauce is not thick and clumpy. So I'm going to keep moving it together until I can tell that it's a velvety sauce and that the cheese has melted. And you can tell that because it'll be thinner and it'll also be creamier. And you'll be able to feel it. You'll be able to see it and you'll be able to feel it. I don't know, it probably looks the same on camera there. Again, too bad we don't have close-ups. If you go to the link, you can get a close-up of what it looks like, and this one looks identical to the one on there on my website. So the last thing we're going to do is we're going to add in this already cooked bacon. And just toss it in there. Again, I don't season it. Some Americans will add other things like peas and sun-dried tomatoes, maybe even a little bit of parsley, but this is what you're going to get if you're in Italy.